Today we are going to multiply fractions and mixed numbers by whole numbers. Let's review multiplying a whole number by a fraction. When you multiply a whole number by a fraction, you multiply the whole number by the numerator and you keep the denominator the same. 3 times 3 is 9. Keep the denominator the same. 9/4 is an improper fraction. Fractions are division, so you can set this up as 9 divided by 4. You get an answer of 2 1/4. Or you can ask yourself, 4 goes into 9 2 times without going over, and there would be 1/4 left over. 5 times 2/3, 5 times 2 is 10. Keep your denominator the same. 3 goes into 10 3 times with 1/3 left over. 2 times 3 is 6 fourths. 4 goes into 6 one time with 2/4 left over, and we can reduce or simplify that to equal 1.5. Here, 6 times 2 is 12 thirds. 3 goes into 12 4 times with no thirds left over. Because 12 divided by 3 is 4, our answer is just 4. Now we are going to learn what to do if we want to multiply a whole number by a mixed number. Remember, multiplication means groups of. So 3 times 1.5 means you have 3 groups of 1.5. Here's 1.5, that's one group. Another whole and a half, and that's another group. And then another whole and a half. If you look at this all together, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 wholes and a half of another whole. Well, how could we figure that out without drawing the picture? There's 2 different ways. The first way is to make your mixed number into an improper fraction. We make a mixed number mad, meaning we make a mixed number into an improper fraction by multiplying, adding, and keeping the denominator the same. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. Keep your denominator the same. We'll rewrite our multiplication sign. We'll rewrite the 3. And now we have this set up as a whole number times a fraction, and we know how to do that. 3 times 3 is 9. Keep your denominator the same. Then 2 goes into 9 4 times with 1/2 left over. We got the same answer of 4.5. Another way we can do this is by multiplying 3 times 1 and then 3 times 1/2. So 3 times 1.5. We can first multiply our 3 times 1. 3 times 1 is 3. And then we can multiply 3 times 1/2. 3 times 1/2 is 3 halves. We add that together and we end up with 3 and 3 halves, which really equals 4.5. Two groups of 2.5, or 2 times 2.5. My preferred way of doing it is converting this into an improper fraction. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Keep your denominator the same. Now we have a whole number times a fraction. 2 times 5 is 10 halves, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. If we wanted to do this as multiplying the whole number by the whole number of your mixed number and the whole number by your fraction, you can do that. This is going to be the last time I use that as an example, because my preferred way of solving is by converting to improper fractions. Let's take our 2 and multiply it by 2. That equals 4. We'll add that to 2 times 1/2, which equals 2 halves. 4 plus 2 halves, this is really the same as 1, so that equals 5. Moving forward, we're going to only solve these by converting the mixed number into an improper fraction because that is my preferred way of solving a whole number by a mixed number. So the first thing, 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So 1 and 1/4 is equivalent to 5/4. 2 times 5 is 10. Keep the denominator the same. 4 goes into 10 2 times with 2/4 left over, and then you can simplify that to equal 2 1/2. 3 times 2 1/2. Convert this into an improper fraction. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. Halves. 3 times 5 is 15. Keep your denominator the same. 2 goes into 15 7 times with 1/2 left over. Here's 3 more examples. So we can convert this into an improper fraction. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8 thirds. So 2 times 8 thirds is 16 thirds. 3 goes into 16 5 times with 1/3 left over. The next problem is 5 times 1 and 1/4. Make this improper by doing 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5/4. 5 times 5 is 25. Keep your denominator the same. 4 goes into 25 6 times with 1/4 left over. 4 times 1 1/2. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. Halves. 4 times 3 is 12. Keep your denominator the same. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Here are 6 more problems. Feel free to pause the video and solve these on your own. All right, here are the answers to those 6 problems. Notice how these last 2 problems are pretty challenging. So for 6 times 2 and 1/4, you end up with 54/4. You would need to set up long division to figure out what that equals to. So 54 divided by 4. 4 goes into 5 1 times 4 is 4. Subtract, bring down the 4. 4 goes into 14 3 times. 3 times 4 is 12. 14 minus 12 is 2. So you get an answer of 13 2/4. The same thing with 3 times 1/4. 3 and 1/4 times 5. Notice I did a lot of steps here. First, I converted it to an improper fraction and I got 13/4. And I copied down my times 5. Then I had to multiply 5 times 13. I don't know that in my head, so I did that on the side over here. And I ended up with an answer of 65, so 65/4. Again, then I needed to set up long division. 65 divided by 4 is 16, and I ended up with 16/4. So for some of these problems, they involve a lot of different steps. What you want to think about is, first, take your mixed number, convert it to an improper fraction, then you multiply your numerator times your whole number, keep your denominator the same. And then if it's an improper fraction, to go from improper to a mixed number, you need to divide.